Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Ben, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Now, it probably sounds like a glib and obvious question to start with, but given where you've just been, how are you?
Look, it's funny what you do when you go somewhere like Afghanistan, and I've got to say I didn't know what was going to happen to me when I did go to Afghanistan, but I stopped chewing my nails because I thought I've got to get a real fucking problem. And I used to worry about things that were really not worth worrying about. And I realised then, besides the fact that you're also carrying rabies and very bizarre diseases under your nails, that was another impetus to not chew my nails. But that I used to worry about things that were just not worth worrying about. That there are young people over there now dealing with some immense things. Right now, they're 3 or 4 hours behind us in this time zone, cruising around in Bushmasters in the middle of very hostile place.
We'll talk more about your experience directly there. And how are your nails? Yeah, they're all
I
there.
still haven't started chewing them.
Yeah, good to hear.
I also grew a beard. Do you like the beard? No, you're full of shit. You don't really like it.
Let's jump back. How did the appointment to be an official war artist come about?
I remember Wendy Sharp, who I'm sure a lot of you would know, went to Timor, I think, and I remember hearing about that on the radio, and it was the first time I'd heard about the whole program through the Australian War Memorial of a war artist. Obviously, there was a whole program for it years ago, but in my lifetime, I wasn't aware of it, and I thought, what a bizarre and amazing thing, and I often had thought that being an artist was often about responding to not only to life but to experience, to having experiences and then responding to those experiences. And going to a war as a young man for me was sort of my most horrifying prospect. I remember as I was 16 and 17 years old, being probably rather maybe ridiculously paranoid that war was going to break out and that I would be conscripted into the army. And Mum used to say, "Don't worry, you're paranoid." But if you're my age, we grew up through the Cold War, and my whole childhood I remember watching guys like you on TV describing what was happening between Russia and America and this constant threat of war. And the last war that my uncle was conscripted into, conscription did exist, and 18-year-old men, in fact 18 and 1 day old, is the first point of conscription when young men are sent to war, often against their will. So it wasn't, from my point of view, completely paranoid. It was based in what has happened before in my history as a very young child and then as an adult. So I literally got a phone call as I was driving along to Robertson to my home with my 2 kids in the back, and the lady said, "My name's Laura Webster from the Australian War Memorial, and we want you to be the next war artist." And I actually thought it was my friend Luke Skiberis in Hill End. And I said, "No, piss off, Skibbo." She said, no, Ben, I'm serious. I beg your pardon." And that was it.
As you mentioned that your kids were in the back, so you're a husband, you're a father. As an artist, you don't have to enlist for this sort of thing.
No.
Why did you say yes?
Look, I don't think I could say no. I think it was actually a real honour to be asked, and I also think that in a functioning democracy, I've always believed that the fact that there's young men and women in the face of such critical danger in Afghanistan is because we are a part of a democracy, and whether we like it or not, and whether we voted for it or not, we sent those young people there. As a group of voting public in Australia, we put the government in that then sends those people to war. And the War Memorial is very open, and in that conversation, right from the beginning, said, we want you, if you want to be critical and make work about how destructive it is or how damaging it is, then we will embrace that, and we push you to make those comments if that's how you feel. And therefore I hate to use the word cowardice, but I would have to go through with that. I sort of felt like it was my responsibility.
At that point, prior to going, in regard to Australia's military presence and contribution in Afghanistan. Were you for it or against it?
No, I was definitely against it. I thought it came out of a place, and look, that's really got nothing to do with my commission there, I have to say. When I was there, it wasn't whether I was for it or against it or not, but I felt...
It didn't inform your work, though, in any way?
No, it won't, no. My work now has become very much about the young people that I met, some of whom were one young man who was 18, 3 months into his deployment in Afghanistan, and I made a video work about him. I sat with him and interviewed him, and he started shaking, and I'm old enough to understand what post-traumatic stress disorder was, and I stopped the video and said, "You are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and you need to see your captain and tell him." I by then understood the process of how the army was working, and he said, "Other people have told me that already, Ben, but please, I'm not going to talk about it now. I've still got 5 months left of my deployment." So for me, instantly the work has become about the experience of these young people. I'm not a political artist. I understand why we're there. I don't necessarily agree with why we're there, although I do understand the allegiance that we have with America. It's sort of a very big question.
How did you prepare, both personally and artistically? Did you, for example, go to the War Memorial to see the work of your 63 official war artist predecessors? And did you go to War Artist Boot Camp?
No, but you've got to go to boot camp with all the soldiers and do force preparation and learn how to survive being kidnapped, for example, which I just thought I would run before I was taught, just run. And they won't let me use a gun, but they did train me how to disarm and arm an AK-47 assault rifle, which is it wasn't lost on me that it was the enemy's rifle. I said, I know I'm an artist, but I'm pretty peaceful. Why am I learning how to arm and disarm an AK-47? And they said to me, if you need to use the AK-47, all hell's break loose, and we want you to be able to use it. So in other words, I guess they're assuming I was going to grab one of the baddies and wrestle him to the ground and take his rifle. But there's a whole set of rules, and I did force preparation at Randwick, and then I did another whole week of force preparation in Dubai before I went in, which was learning. I was actually very impressed, I have to say. I didn't think that they would prepare young soldiers so psychologically in how to accept not only the extreme circumstances that they're in, but also the difference in the environment, in the societies that they're in. So the Afghan community, which is like everywhere in most parts of the world that's not first world, is very different.
Take us back to October when you were first there, when you first stepped out. I presume you flew in. When you flew in, what were your first impressions? What struck your eyes and your creative processes? What struck you as a young man?
The first thing that happened was that I forgot my thongs. And you have to take thongs so that you have to wear them in the shower. It's the rule. Except the journalist I was travelling with said, "I'm not bringing thongs, Quilty." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "I've already got tinea."
Nice. As we all do.
You journalists, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I had to find thongs at the airport in Afghanistan, which was just a bizarre experience. They don't speak English and they don't know what a thong is.
Did you find any?
I did. I got some thongs. Havanas with a gold thing. They're pretty cool. And then, the first thing that I realised was how regimented everything is. You know, how everything is calculated. I slept in a shipping container for 4.5 weeks, an armed shipping container with 5 other soldiers, and every single morning we're up about between 5:30 and 6, and everything is extremely regimented, and in a way it helps you survive the very bizarre, surreal place that you're in.
Did you have to go looking for subjects, or did subjects find you?
To be quite honest with you, at first I just wanted to hide and I wanted to fit in. I didn't want to be in anybody's way. because it's pretty extreme. That you learn instantly as soon as you fly into Kandahar how to survive rocket blasts. And I thought, what are we learning this for? On the first night, 3 rockets landed inside the Kandahar air base, and one American woman was killed on that first night inside the base.
How did you cope with that?
I thought, why? What am I doing here? Why am I here? And all the young soldiers make jokes they all say you're more likely to be hit by a bus in Sydney than you are to be hit by a rocket in Kandahar, which is absolute crap. But there's no other way to emotionally survive the experience of being rocketed except to turn it into a joke. And I kept reverting back to my studies of Catch-22 when I was in Year 9 at high school, because it's exactly the same. It's completely absurd. It's life and death and sexuality as well that's completely sort of expelled. There's rumours that they're putting anti-libido drugs in the food in the mess halls, which I read in Catch-22 when I was 15. It's exactly the same.
So on the subjects, once you did feel as though, okay, I've got my feet on the ground here, I can fit into this rhythm, this pattern, did you seek subjects, and what were you, or who were you looking for?
Well, I was the only one without a gun, and the young American soldiers in Kandahar Air Base, I remember seeing one young girl and thinking, what are you doing here, and where's your mother or father? And as she walked past me, she had an M16 slung across her back. So she was obviously 18, but a very young-looking woman with an M16 and wearing a bikini top with shorts in the middle of Kandahar Air Base. It's one of the most surreal images I've ever seen. So all of those I was photographing constantly. And when you get to Kandahar, you're told that you're not allowed... after 9 o'clock at night, you have to have an armed escort. You have to have an armed escort 24 hours a day in Kandahar Air Base. But after 9 o'clock at night, they forbid you to walk through the American quarters of the base. And I said, what's that about? I thought maybe they were flying the flag and saying their prayers or something, and we weren't allowed there. But it's because the American sleeping quarters in Kandahar Air Base is so dangerous that they won't let even armed people in there, because the whole gang thing started up there. There's 35,000 people at the equivalent of CES in America. They now have always an army official trying to get young men and women to join the army to get more troops into Afghanistan. So they're getting anyone they can to go there, and that structure of American society exists in Kandahar, which is completely surreal.
Wow. In terms of the male culture, which you've become very well known for depicting and approaching, in Australia, particularly your young years, whether it be hooning around, you depict that, or the morning after a big night out. When you're plonked in the middle of a different sort of male culture, entwined with military culture, how did you approach portraying that?
Well, I'm still making some pretty bad paintings, so I haven't got an answer for that yet. But it is a very masculine culture, especially in Tarancot. And to be quite honest with you, there's an argument about women wanting to be in the Special Forces. And I don't want to be in the Special Forces, and I don't know why any woman would want to be in the Special Forces, unless you've got something wrong with you. I don't know why those young men are in the Special Forces. I don't understand it. I asked all of them, everyone that I became friends with and thought wouldn't shoot me for asking the question, why are you here? What are you doing here?
And what sort of answers did you get?
Well, quite often you realise through their answer that at 18 years old, what young man has not made a strange decision? And if you're looking down the barrel at 15 or 16 years old at beginning a trade, very physically demanding job, possibly in the western suburbs of Sydney, and given the opportunity and a lot more money, get on an aeroplane, do training with a whole lot of very fit young men, have gym memberships thrown at you, and travel to Afghanistan, I could see very easily why that decision would take them in that direction. Some of them, not publicly, but very definitely are ruining that decision. Others seem to enjoy the adrenaline rush, and later on I assume they're going to suffer the post-stress of having that much adrenaline running through you for 8 months at a time.
for portraying folks like the Special Forces guys. So I remember talking with Lewis Miller, who was one of Ben's predecessors. He was in Iraq about 7-8 years ago. And in Western Iraq, he came across the Special Forces guys. And he was told, he's a celebrated portrait artist, he was told, you can paint whatever you like except faces. He said, I'm a portraitist.
Pretty hard for me.
And I'm just wondering, and Lewis found ways around it and took creative license in portraying these guys and these guys' character. Did you firstly have anyone say no faces, and secondly, how did you go about portraying these young men?
I think, and Scott asked me this question the other day, I think, having thought about it for a few days, 7 or 8 years ago, they were full of adrenaline, believing in their cause, fighting alongside this massive force. 7 or 8 years later, they're a pretty exhausted bunch of young people who are counting down the days till this is over. But by the same token, the strange thing that I realised over there, that every death, and it's quite a small force, so they all have suffered from losing people who are quite close to them, makes them strangely more confident that they will complete the task that they've set out to complete. And I didn't really understand that. But when you ask one of them why, all of them have the same answer. How do you go home and tell that young man's wife that we pulled out because of their death? Their wife will then say, well, why didn't you pull out the day before? And it becomes this sort of self-perpetuating cycle, I guess, that in a weird way, the more deaths, the more those soldiers are determined to stay there. And the job that they're doing is very openly a positive one in a huge part of the Uruzgan Valley that I saw, in very dangerous sort of circumstances, but building schools, quite physically, obviously very positive things, and hugely positive response from some of the local community, not all of it.
What you're doing is not only creating a work of art, you're creating in effect a historical document, and with these, particularly with your portraits at least, what you're doing is immortalising young men and women in a career which is all about mortality. Did any of them want to be and were keen to be immortalised so that their children and grandchildren could see them in the archives of the War Memorial or hanging on the War Memorial wall? Did anyone approach you and say, Ben, do a portrait of me?
No. I ended up getting in contact with the head of special operations in Afghanistan, and I talked him right through the process of what I wanted to do. I thought I was showing him some images of past work that would make his young soldiers feel very confident that I would do a good job. And he said, I'll put it out to all of them. And there was 350 of them in Tarankot that night. And one of them showed up the next day. And he was only there because I found out later the commander had forced him to come. So, and it was more about being there for a period of time and getting to know them, and them getting to see that I'm pretty open myself about how I feel about things, about who I am, and I hopefully expected that from them. But there was other ones. I passed over the second in command of Afghanistan on my way home, who was an air commodore, so a very highly decorated soldier, very quietly spoken, lovely man, who told me by coincidence he was retiring into a little town called Robertson, which is where I live. And I said, funny, I live there. It was very surreal. But by the time I got back, the War Memorial had said, we'd rather you stay away from him. We think he might be suffering a bit. And I imagined he was having a nervous breakdown. The pressure of what he'd seen and what he'd witnessed was too much. They said, we don't want you to talk to him. I thought, no, that's exactly who I need to talk to. And I got him into the studio, and that's the one painting that so far I really feel has got something about it.
When you were in the field, how did you work in the field, and what materials did you take? What medium did you use?
I didn't know what to take, so I took everything I could, but you have to carry your own gear. So I had a video camera, ink, brushes, pens, everything that I could fit into a few bags. One day in Tarankot, I said to a young fella who was he was drinking 5 coffees a day and they were 4 shots each. And I told him at the end of the first day that you're having 20 coffees a day. Did you know that? He went, yeah. I said, righto. He was great. He was lovely. He was helpful, supportive, very open, trying to help me get my job done. He understood that I was quite critical of certain things about what I was seeing. And I said one day, I want you to take me to the most spectacular part of the base in Tarancot. So we drove up this hill and I got out and thought, this is it. This is the landscape that I've come to see. And I've got enough imagery of the young men and women, and I laid out my stuff and he started smoking, and I hadn't seen him smoke a cigarette once for days and days. I said, are you all right? What's going on? He said, nothing. I said, go and sit down somewhere. He said, no. I said, what's wrong? And he said, I've never sat so long in this spot in my life. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, we're well within the 3-kilometre range of a sniper rifle. I said, you've never, ever seen an artist pack up his gear so quick. Gone. And on the car on the way home, many expletives. What the fuck are you taking me there for? And he said, you wanted the most beautiful spot. That's it.
Yeah, you know, Sir William Dargie, who was a World War II official war artist and, like yourself, an Archibald winner, when I asked him what did he take or what did he find the most valuable item in the field, he said, memory. It's the best thing a war artist can have. In terms of now that you're back home and you're working on what you brought out of Afghanistan, how important is memory in shaping what you're creating? It's
a great question. The east coast of Australia is a complete oasis compared to anything in Afghanistan. It's such a dry place. There's no power and no water in the whole of Uruzgan Valley. There's no running water and no power anywhere. So it's not third world. They have never been anything but subsistence farmers in that part of Afghanistan. And it's funny how quickly you forget. And in some ways, one month or 5 weeks is not nearly enough to really let it, although I'm happy that it was only that long too. I was counting down the days to leaving, that's for sure. But it's integral to making something that's more than just a likeness, that's for sure.
And bringing all of that out, I know it's a crystal ball question and hard to answer in these early stages. How do you think those few weeks there have reshaped what you do beyond the war art from here on in? And how's it shaped beyond you worrying about your nails no more?
I'm never going to chew my nails again.
Are there any other early signs that you think this has been life-changing?
No, I don't know yet. It's a good
Artistically?
question. Well, I think you, like any big experience, that you've got to take the risks to make something, and making something that's, I often find myself in the studio going down in scale, and making things that are smaller and contained and simple, and the conceptual idea behind it's simple, to really push it out there and make things that I'm uncomfortable with, I guess. But any big experience does that. Finally,
in this age of the moving picture and of television, and where you can watch war 24 hours, 7 days a week if a war is underway and there's cameras there, now that you've gone in as an artist, what is the point, what is the value, do you believe, of the war artist and what he or she produces in the 21st century? And what does it bring back to people that a moving image cannot give?
Look, I can't talk for other artists, but for me it's definitely, and I hope to make works that examine the way these young people feel when they're there and what happens to them when they get back. And I had a very close friend who was had put himself into a hospital for his depression in Sydney, and he said to me, Benny, the funny thing is that there was 4 Vietnam veterans in there, and this is just before Christmas, still dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And the thing that I find very rarely reported in what's hard to report on is what's happening to these young people when they're faced with this. And hopefully by me, in a way, reporting on that and making work, which I can see will happen for quite some years, because I've made friendships and these young people will come to my studio and will sit for me, will in a way hopefully change the way our democracy works in putting people in that position.
And when can we all see these works? When are they due to be exhibited?
The show, which is non-existent at the moment, will tour next year in 2013 from the War Memorial in Victoria, New South Wales, and up to Queensland.
Well, Ben Quilty, we all look forward to seeing those works, and thank you for being so generous with your insights and your time here this evening.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, mate.